Welcome back, guys. In the previous video you learned about how to create the context for your store, for your cart store, and how to pass data to different components using the provider, using the context API. Okay, in this video we're going to learn about creating an add to cart button, which when clicked is going to take the data of the product and add that to the local storage so that we can then show that into the cart icon. Okay, great. So let's start then. The first thing we're going to want to do is basically create a directory inside of the component called cart. This is where we'll keep our cart related components. So add to cart. So we'll create okay, let me just close everything first. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the console log, so we don't need all of this information in the header. That just getting rid of that. We added that in the previous video. Inside of the cart directory we will create a component called add to cart button .js. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get the link from next link. Okay, we'll say const, and we'll create a component called add to cart button, and since it's a functional component we're going to use props. We're going to get props, and then we just return. For now let's just return a development. We'll get back to this. Okay, now next thing we want here is basically the product information. So we're going to pass the product information into add to cart, which we'll pull out in a moment. Okay, so let's just create the button over here. Say react dot fragment, and then we'll add a button, and we are going to add a class name on it. Say btn secondary, and then we'll just put add to cart. Next thing we need to do is just export this. So export default add to cart button. So we'll go ahead and put this add to cart button onto each of the products. So we'll go to the product component. So we have got the product component right here. So just beneath the price element we can just add to cart button, and now if we check, sure enough we've got the add to cart button. Now there are certain information that we do want to pass into this, which is the product information. So we can just say product over here and just pass the product information like this. So you already have the product object which contains the ID, the price, and all of that information. We just need to pass that information into the add to cart button. Okay, awesome. So coming back to our add to cart component, we have the product that we've just passed, so we can just pull that out from props. Okay, we are going to go ahead and create a function which basically is going to handle the cart. So when this button is clicked, we're going to take the data and just put that into the local storage. So let's go ahead and add an event listener on click, and we'll create a function called handle add to cart click. Okay, so we'll create this function. This is a custom function and we can just add it here. We'll say const, and then okay, we want to set all of the data from the product that we get into the local storage, and as we discussed that local storage will only be available client side in the browser. It won't be available on the server side. So we do want to check if currently it is on the client side or not. Browser process.browser. So as we explained in the previous video, that process.browser is going to be true if this is being executed on the client side. Okay, so next thing we need to do is check if the cart already has the product data available. So we'll create a variable called existing cart, and we'll say local storage dot get item, and remember we are using the key as woo next cart. Okay, now we'll check if the cart has the items already, then update the existing. So we'll check if existing cart, else add a new item. Okay, awesome. So if there are no items in the array, which is in the current situation, okay, then we're going to create an empty array and add a new one. So let me just add a comment over here. If no item in the cart, create an empty array and push the item, or just add the item. Okay, so you want to say const new cart. We are going to go ahead and call a function that allows us to do that. So in a moment we will create a function called add first product, and then we'll just pass product into it. Okay, so we haven't created this function yet, but we will create it in a moment. Okay, so let's do that. And also we want to use the context, because we want to set that information in the context. So remember that we have created context over here, and in the previous video I showed it to you how to pull that information. So the first thing you need to do is basically get the use state and use context wherever you want it. So let's we want it into the add to cart button, so we are going to go ahead and import use state and use context from React. Okay, and then we're also going to import the app context that we've just created, which is right here. Okay, from app context, and then what we're going to do is come over here and just pull whatever we need. So remember, we're passing the data which is cart and set cart. So cart is an object containing the cart information, and set cart is the method. So we can just pull these two out from the provider, so using the use context method from React. Okay, so we'll just say cart set cart is equal to use context, and we'll just pass app context into it that we've just created. Okay. Okay, perfect. And then we're just going to call this function right here and pass the new cart value. So what would happen is that when the user clicks the button, because we have passed the product data into this component add to cart, so just go back and show you. So we are calling this component here add to cart button right here, and because in the product component we have the product data, we are passing that as an attribute, and inside of the add to cart button we are getting that data in form of props. We are pulling product out of it, and then we are just going to go ahead and add this button. So when the user clicks on this button, we already have the product data available. We're going to check if the data is there inside of the local storage. If we haven't, if it's the first time, then we're going to call this function, which we will create in a moment, which will add the product information into the local storage. And we will also call the function set cart, so that we can set the new value of the product into the context, so that it's available to other components as well. So as you already know that inside of the app context we have the set cart method, cart data. Okay, so the job of this is just to pull the information from the local storage and just set the cart data. Okay, awesome, great. So this method basically just goes ahead and updates the state. So not the use effect, but it updates the state. Whatever value you pass inside of the set cart, it goes and updates the cart value to that. So over here we are just passing the new cart value to set cart, so we're just going to go ahead and update the cart value, and it's available to all the components which are wrapped inside of the app context.provider. Awesome, great. So next thing we want to do is create this function which is called add first product, and rather than making this component dirty by putting everything here, let's make things simple by going ahead and isolating things. So all the functions, we are going to keep it inside of functions.js. So inside of the root directory, let's create a function.js file. Okay, and this is the place where we're going to create the function, which is the add first product. Okay, so let's create one. We're going to say export const add first product, and it's going to get products, or product, single product actually. So remember that we are passing product to this function, so that's what it takes. Okay, and what we're going to do is we'll get the product price out of the product. So we'll say let product price. Now remember that the product price is a string, so we need to convert it into the float value because the price can be in decimal. So what we're going to do is we'll just create a function called get float value, because we are going to need this function every now and then whenever we are dealing with the price. So it's better to create one and just reuse it. So it takes string. So we're just going to use this function and add our product price, product dot price. Now we'll just say let float value. So we'll create this variable and we'll say string not match. So we're going to use a regular expression because remember that in the product, or let me show that to you so it makes sense. Let me just comment this out, and let me just console the product for you so that you can see what's going on. Console product. Okay. Now if I do an inspect element, you can see that inside of the product, so you can see that it's got a pound sign, so we need to get rid of this pound sign. So that is the reason why we are creating this function that does that for us. So we're going to use regex string.match, and we'll say look for any plus or minus -d plus dot d plus and then /g, and get the first element out of that. So what this is going to do is going to match for that information, and it's going to give us in form of an array, and we want the first item from the array. Okay, so let's return in case if the float value is not null, which means it's got a value inside of it, then and only then use a parse float, and then parse float to float value, because of course we don't want the all the digits, because sometimes when you're doing calculation you can have like 10 digits after the decimal or more, so it's better to get only to a fixed number of digits. So let's say I only want 2, so I'll just put 2 over here. So I want to show this to you in action, so let me just do a console log over here, say float value, float value. Okay, we need to import the add first product first. So you go back to add to cart and we just import it, import add first product from function. Okay, we need to add the else statement. Now let's click on add to cart. Sure enough, you can see you have the float value is 11.05, right? Earlier when it wasn't there, then it was pound sign. Okay, and if I don't add the first element, what do we get? So let me refresh it once again and show it to you. So inside of the product, we are passing the price, which is this value. So inside of this function string, we are passing this value, and if I console log the float value when we do a string match, let's see what we get. So we click on the add to cart, you can see it's an array and it's the first element, so that's why we want the first element. So what this has done is actually matched anything which is not a sign and just a number. Okay, so it's matched that and it's given us that. Now this float value is, let me see the type of what type it is. It's a string, so we need to convert it into the float value. Okay, so what we are doing over here is that we are converting it into the float value and then getting the up to 2 digits and then again converting that into the float value. So eventually if I do a console log of product price and also check the type of it, you see we get a number, and this is exactly what we want because we want to store float values. Okay, so we got it. So the best part is that anytime we want to convert it, we just have to call this function and then we get our value. So we've got the product price so far.